episode is brought to you by WHU, the Otto Beisheim School of Management. WHU is reshaping the way students learn about business, management, finance, and entrepreneurship through its innovative programs and partnerships in Germany and across the globe. To learn more about this globally ranked university, visit whu.edu today.
Hey folks, Gerrit here. In today's episode, we introduce Patrick Vogel, co-founder and CFO of autonomous driving startup Autonomos GmbH. Since exiting the global navigation company TomTom in 2017, Patrick now heads their office operations in Berlin while pursuing his passion for angel investing. We'll be discussing the commercialization of university technology, bootstrapping for flexibility, capitalization as an exit strategy, and our 20-plus year friendship. Hope you enjoy it.
Coming to you from WHU on the banks of the Rhine River in beautiful Vallendar, Germany. This is the best and most awesome founder podcast. A show about entrepreneurs, innovators, advisors, and educators, and the stories that make them who they are today.
There's a saying in English, you have a face for radio.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about podcasts is appearance doesn't matter. And what I find really great is no one's judging the way you look or the way you dress. It's kind of a deep dive into someone's brain. When you have a conversation and you dig a little deeper into something that they're experts on, you really get to see how smart they are. You know, it may not be interesting to one person, but there's someone out there that's going, this is a topic that's interesting to me, and they're riveted. Well, Patrick, you know, you and I have known each other a long time, so this is the first podcast that I get to record with someone I've got a long history with. So, I want to start by thanking you for inviting me to your beautiful office in Berlin on the river here and taking time out of your Saturday from family and life to sit in front of this microphone with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gerrit. I was really thrilled to hear you're coming because I liked our last conversation. It's so fun to run into an old friend every 5 or 10 years and catch up with a lot of, how you call it, war stories to tell. So, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
You and I have both come a long way from crazy nights on inflatable unicorns and surf town parties. And how long have we known each other?
I remember you came to a friend's house when we were going swimming at the Lake of Constance as the big brother from America, looking like Johnny Knoxville by then. And I think quite regularly over the time you visited your mom in the Lake of Constance, right? So it has to be 20 years now.
Well, my friend, you have come a long way from those days, and some pretty amazing things have kind of happened on both of our journeys, but I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your experience. I'd be really interested if you could just kind of tell your story of where you come from, how you got to where you are today.
It was a long ride, and if I look back, it all sounds as if it was planned out that way for me. I think in a good position now. It hasn't always been that clear, judging from being not the brightest and best student of all times, failing in school a lot, and switching schools, still making Abitur somehow, and then deciding what I want to choose as a profession. And I think I have always decided toward creating broad opportunities for myself. So and maybe also not always going the toughest route. So when I chose to go for business administration studies, it was the easy choice for me because I wasn't necessarily passionate about it, but I knew I could do it. I was good at it in school, and I knew back then Betriebswirtschaftslehre was something that would still have a broad couple of options as a profession without choosing like one specific thing. I didn't have that profession in mind that I really want to become this or that, so I'd really always go that route, what would open up a lot of opportunities that I don't know yet.
Since
Since you're someone who has made a career out of commercializing university technology innovations, perhaps you can talk a little bit about your educational background.
So in Germany we had this system, ZVS, Zentrale Vergabestelle für Studienplätze. So basically means you have a right for a place to study, but you do not have the right to choose a location specifically. They can decide for you where there is enough space to take you on. So you just apply, you have like a list of universities you would prefer and like choose 3 of them. But everybody chooses the same universities, and as a southern German, you tend to stay in your area somewhere. So I didn't get any of my choices, and they just chose for me. And it was a place called Freiberg in the middle of Saxonia, like 600 kilometers from home. So just to put this in comparison, it's like a 6-hour drive when you can be in Italy in 3 hours. Right. It was really not the obvious choice for me, but then I looked at it and I quickly found out that everybody who was there studying business administration was in the same situation. Nobody chose to go there, and this became a melting pot for people with maybe not the best grades graduating, and some nice mixture of people who are open enough to leave their hometown far away and start something new for themselves, by themselves.
So it's like the university for late bloomers?
Maybe it is, yeah. So, and it always was an interesting time because, you know, the university has a long history. It's actually the oldest Montan University, like for geology, and, you know, you have all this mining industries that has traditionally been in that area. And this was the reputation of the university. So after the reunification, they took on business administration. It was pretty new there. So a lot of professors from the western part of Germany. The attractive thing was that you still had this old structures, you know, very GDR-like, you know, communist-style town, but with a lot of things blossoming. You know, you could see there's some momentum in rebuilding that whole structure, and there were constant changes during our universities and you know, our time there, and I think we all cherished the situation that it was a familiar atmosphere. So I stayed and did my full studies there for quite some time, almost 6 years, and also went to Dresden, which is like a 30-minute train ride from there. Studying was still free in Saxonia, so I could just enroll in Dresden without an extra efforts. It was really, really cheap to live there. You know, we had great apartments, old, but yeah, we made it nice for ourselves there. And so, yeah, I really liked to study there. And
so how did you go from business school in Freiberg to being an entrepreneur in Berlin?
There were 2 influences that basically brought me to the city and the topic. First influence was during that time there were this new entrepreneurship academic way of researching business administration around young companies, because obviously, you know, the whole science around business administration was about big companies, you know, studying the mechanics of a huge system, and you know, going into, you know, how can I influence marketing with the tools given, with the history and statistics I can use, and you don't have that in a startup. Right. And so there was this entrepreneurship chair in Dresden from Professor Ševčík that took this on as a main topic, to say, well, they had 2 main topics, one or roads of education. One was technology and innovation management. The other one was entrepreneurship. Yeah, I was interested in that. Did my a main part of my main studies in Dresden there. Became associated with writing business plans, you know, together with actually real founders from the technical part of this university who approached the chair to find students to help them with, you know, spinning their ideas into a business plan.
So often, business ideas are coming from the business-minded people, and there's such a discussion on where do we find the technical talent. A lot of people forget that the technical talent also needs those business skill sets to take the technology or the innovation and commercialize it and make it market viable?
I'm a huge believer in that interdisciplinary element, So when I finished studies and we had our first lookout for jobs, I found something at the Free University with the goal to write a concept for the chair of biocomputational mathematics. So a mixture between computer sciences and mathematics applied to life sciences, basically. So we had 1 year to write a concept that would turn into a foundation of our innovation lab. We were surrounded by highly technical people who knew exactly what they wanted to do, but the challenge was like to filter it, bring it down to a level that others would understand it. And at the end of the day, you might have some evaluators of those concepts that are into the topic, but the chances are higher that you have to bring it down to a level everybody can understand it. I knew I could do that, and I also had a feeling that it would be a great start for my profession because, again, a lot of broad opportunities arising. Be a few things to learn from it. It's always nice to have a technology topic that you're interested in because you can't stop learning about it. You can go into depth of that. Although I had some coding courses, I was never somebody to write a line of code, but I would understand why it's needed and enough to throw around enough buzzwords that would make sense. And so there was the consulting aspect of it to say, well, this chair they have so many great things that they do in research, but which of these could be applied to something everybody would see that has a market value? So there's that. Yeah.
Commercialization.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is actually the most obvious part why you would bring somebody with a business background in to say, well, help us spin it into something that would make this thing. So we had a full year to write that concept. Turned out well for us. We raised 2.5 million for them to build that innovation lab. Information-based medicine, we call it, and it was aimed towards that appearing market of personalized medicine.
So you went from the life sciences and personalized medicine, a subject you previously knew little about, to an autonomous vehicle project, something I know is right up your alley.
That's exactly my topic, more than life sciences, So I've been the biggest David Hasselhoff fan ever. There was no evening at 6:30 where I didn't watch ORF Knight Rider, and I strongly believed in this topic, So naively, because I had no technical background to know whether it's working or not, but the outlook was there. I think that's something that we should strive for. So the purpose was there. I know the team was cool, and so this was a perfect mixture. And we built up the Autonomos labs, the innovation lab at the Artificial Intelligence chair at the Free University. Employed 12 full-time researchers on that topic.
And you had a whole new learning curve then, because you went from medical data, where you were kind of translating this technological space into rational business marketability, and now you were switching to a completely different science discipline.
Yes and no. So it was still software, basically, right? So it's it was even the same chair. The others were a bit stronger towards mathematics and modeling complex systems, being the human body. The other part was transferring basic robotic know-how onto the car. Mm-hmm. So the car, in the mindset of a roboticist, is just a robot on wheels. So you need always the same three elements when you make that. The first one is we have a perception layer. You use all the sensors, and like the human uses his eyes and ears to have a perception of the surrounding, of the environment. the car uses the sensors. And then you have the second layer, which is the decision-making layer. So you can apply certain rules that you, for example, know because there are rules how to drive. There are some other things you wouldn't know and figure out what is the rule behind it. But this is the decision-making element. And then you have the third element, which is basically the action side of it, to bring it, to make the car accelerate, brake, stuff like that. Or for the human, it is like moving your hands, the whole
Right.
actuation on it. And so all we do is always thinking in these different pieces of the puzzle and bringing them together seamlessly.
So the shift to the next was relatively seamless. Obviously a little bit of learning, but you were able to make that transition.
You are completely right. I had a huge learning curve how to approach that. But the great thing about my co-founders and the people around me, that they were very for technical-minded people, they were already on a very high level when it comes to communicating what they do. Also, Professor Rojas, one of his main skills was to bring those science topics into a popular awareness stage. So he was always very good at identifying topics that would be the next hot stuff. So, and for autonomous cars, for us it was obvious. For the rest of the industry, it was not. So. For the first years, we were always evangelizing and answering the question if it's coming or not.
When was this?
So 2010.
2010.
So 29 to 2010, yes.
I want to hear where the story evolved from. So you joined the new chair and you started to kind of grow the team behind it in the first few years while you were diving deep and getting into the conferences and building the network. And where did it go from there?
So we did that university research and really guided by Professor Rojas, went from one spectacular experiment to the other. You know, there were some things that really caught on in the media. We had the first mind-controlled car. There was also one thing that we had this scientific approach first to say, well, we work with other researchers who have those EEG headsets on a scientific level, and it turned out to be difficult. So I just bought a playing device over the internet, a gaming one, which was $100 from an Australian company, and said, let's start with that and try what you can do with it, and it worked out really, really good. So we had this gaming device, basically just controlling a few basic signals to accelerate, brake, and left and right. And we plugged it to the car that we already had equipped with drive-by-wire and all that stuff to make it drive autonomously. So we basically just built up on that layer as a new human-machine interface, to just a new way how the mankind could communicate with the car by using thoughts. So with those EEG devices, it's always tricky to find the right person where it would work or what. So it's nothing we would test on the street. So we did this on closed grounds, but we could show some huge successes, how it works fluently on video, and it caught up on YouTube with a few 100,000 clicks, and especially in Britain it was kind of popular. So we made it into a few of these shows. They came over, made clips with us, drove the autonomous cars. And then the next step was really build that car to a level that we would get an exceptional permission for the street. So this was the big reputational goal, to say, well, we want to be the first on the streets of Berlin, if not Germany. And so the professor came to me and said, well, this is your task now. Get an exceptional permission for us. And it's easy to underestimate this task. It's especially in 2010. If you would approach an insurance company to say, well, we want to drive on the streets, can you insure our car? They wouldn't have any statistics to calculate that risk. So for none of the underwriters would dare to just hand it out to you. after a few months I was happy to get an offer, but the offer was like 35,000 a year, which we haven't planned in the budget. So we had to be creative and say, well, this is a future topic, and your insurance might profit from our attention, because here are all our YouTube clips. Have you seen them? And would you be up to a deal that you do the sponsoring and you give the insurance, you put a sticker on the car? And then we approached the right people at the insurance, HDI it was at first. So they insured it. With the insurance, I could go back to the Labo, the German office, to give those permissions for every vehicle, for every street vehicle. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was also a lot of formal aspects, how to get that piece of paper to push it through, and this was something that I am proud of, helping to do that.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
So you guys ended up getting the first autonomous vehicle on the streets in Berlin?
I think we did, yes.
Wow.
I wouldn't know of any other. We really drove autonomously from the street of 17th June, so from Brandenburger Gate to Kaiserdamm. Had a lot of press, public presentations there, a lot of people interested to drive with us, politicians, and so our main currency was intention gained to that point. Yeah, and we did some things differently than a usual research group, since we had that funding, and I think the Ministry for Education and Research was very forward-looking in that way they structured that program. I skipped that first, those programs I mentioned. We applied for the money. It had two goals in mind, to say, well, we want to encourage research institutes to think one step ahead towards market, and the way to do it in our way is we put a business administration guy into those research units, which was like a different way to spread that funding. Yeah, that was a requirement. I would never had my first job if Mr. Hiepe, who was head of that funding project, wouldn't have that structure in mind. And so this worked out. It posed its own challenges because it's new, but some positive element was that we also had that funding to do some marketing and stuff. So the whole way we structured that group was we wanted to build a brand. It was the Autonomous Labs. We were probably the first in the history of the Free University who built their own logo, their corporate identity, with defined colors, with stuff like that. Put a lot of effort also in building a cult around it. When we recruited people in the university, it was easy for us because, I can join the Autonomous group. So we were wearing black hoodies with Autonomous logo on it. So it was that cultural element on it to create a group.
So you were kind of almost creating a little startup culture within the under the umbrella of the university.
Exactly.
It's interesting because you can tell just in you telling the story compared to the previous chair that you worked for versus the Autonomous one, is there was maybe more of an entrepreneurial culture already baked into the organization, where it was let's keep pushing forward, let's keep moving. Everything is about momentum and progress, which is something that's so critical in the startup world, while in science, although there's obviously a momentum to push forward, it's much more methodical and maybe slower and disciplined rather than that more aggressive push.
I agree to that comment. Yeah, in this case, it was just a bit more aligned. And when I started this job, I made this a requirement. This was the first thing I asked the professor: if I take this job, are you with me in founding a company in after we've through with the program for 3 years. So this was clear to me that.
Cool. So now I want to hear that part. So you've been working within the university context for a number of years. You've gotten a lot of press. You've made some milestones, taken the autonomous driving vehicle to the road. What's the journey from university to private sector?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty around what part are we spinning out, because there was no market for what we are doing. Though I always and we always believed in that there is a need for it, but it was not clear how we would commercialize. Completely not. So the next step was looking for other research fundings to cope with that gap. Also a bit of responsibility if you have like 12 people employed and then the funding ends, everybody is without a job. So we tried to prevent that, keep the core team with wrote applications for other research project funding again. You might claim that this is also valuable teaching compared to a startup. You're in the same situation, Yeah. But for us it was, we had the situation of finding our sweet spot where to go, and luckily we had already a broad portfolio of different things we could go into. So one of them being helping the Berlin waste management company, the biggest municipal waste management company in Europe, BSR, Berliner Stadtreinigung. And we were lucky that the former lead of the fleet there was very open towards innovation. So he liked what we were doing, and he said, well, if you can make a car drive on the street autonomously, you must be able to solve my problems, which are like way more real life. Basically, the problem was that 12,000 kilo vehicles would go reverse and hit their own people, hit other people's on the street, hit their own customers in front of their doorsteps if they have to go into a narrow street and don't see where they're driving. So the way to prevent that was basically to make a rule, say you mustn't drive backwards. Mm-hmm. And then this rule exists for 35 years. Wow. Because nobody was able to solve it differently. So
they just couldn't drive backwards. They weren't allowed to drive backwards.
They had to.
But they had to, obviously.
They had to do that every day, with breaking the rules. Wow. But the rule was you may not. Well, then they had some ways to make it possible, introducing somebody who walks behind it, waving somebody in. So you mustn't without somebody waving you in. But in real life, that's not always possible. It's very narrow streets and urge to be quick and so on. So he said, if you can solve that specific problem for us with part of your technology, would be a huge thing.
So it wasn't necessarily a pivot, but it was more opportunistic. You saw a different application of your technology than what you had originally anticipated that could be commercialized.
Exactly.
So you took a chance and ended up snowballing into more business.
Well, there were like thousands of requests and ideas of, what could we do? Everybody has ideas what he could automate, but not everybody was willing to pay for it to make it happen. So this was like what's the English word for lakmus test? They're like
litmus test.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. Whether the pain is big enough to commercialize this. Mm-hmm. So from all the things you want to do, which is what you want to pay for it, you have to sponsor the whole trials. You believe more in the application than we do, but we believe in the technology that we could solve the problem. So this was the main urge for us to build technology. So as you said, the application was secondary, I would say, yes. And we also wanted to stay broad enough to put it in different fields and to always at the end of the day, the end game is autonomous driving. If we could build stereo cameras instead of a laser scanner, we have like already saved tenth of the cost. So it's like you start with a laser scanner for 20,000-30,000, and goal was to have a stereo cam for less than 1,000. So this was like,
Wow.
we knew that one of the main hurdles to bring these technologies into the fields were the cost of the vehicle. We equipped it in a scientific sphere with sensor stuff way over 200K. So this would be like nothing going mainstream.
Yeah, right.
So the main goal for everybody working was invent stuff to make it go broad. The good thing was that we were always, again, broad enough, had a good portfolio of assets and core technologies that we could apply to different fields. We would never just bet on that one horse. So at the same time, we grew the company not only with project by project in the waste management industry, but also by already creating maps for OEMs, car manufacturers and tier 1 suppliers that would like to test their own autonomous vehicles, but didn't know how to formulate the scenery that the cars could understand it. So we were already building our own maps, and this was turned out to be a huge asset later, that we had the know-how of what's needed in the automotive sphere. We built some solutions that we really saw had an effect, and even as a small consulting business, which we were there, we were like charging for our services. But we always had the agreement that the technology we build on the way remains ours.
And you don't get the code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, everything we did was in that mindset of bootstrapping. We're doing this to learn what's needed, but we also need this to put bread on the table, and maybe employ with every project a few of our old guys from the research team back again. And after 4 years of doing so and doubling up each year from 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, we had a team again that was like a force in that sphere, and we had broad shoulders with a lot of different technologies in that sphere with a 10-year track record. And
All
we saw that.
bootstrapped, all patiently learning as you go, developing your technology and your knowledge base and applications, and all just doing fee-for-service work to keep that process rolling.
Yeah.
So you maintained flexibility and stayed strategically bootstrapped for so many years. Then you found the opportunity with the waste management companies to provide product market fit. When you determined it was time to focus on the next stage of Autonomos, how did you decide to raise capital for growth?
Yeah, so at the end of 2016 or during 2016, the idea formed to say, well, we need a Series A funding. We are attractive enough. We have all the assets, and we come from that times where venture capital was based on principles like monetarization and we had to have a proof of concept, in best case something that has been done in other countries already and be a huge success, would scale well, and all things we couldn't comply with as a service company that does deep tech stuff. So the first idea was not really to look for venture capital, but then the 2016 things turned a bit, and we saw not necessarily the venture capitalists, but especially the strategic investors and the big IT companies came into the game. Everybody was like smelling the hype around autonomous driving, and basically every customer we had also mentioned whether he could have a stake. So the floor was already open for discussion, so we went into it and thought about giving a certain stake of the company for a certain funding that we would think would cover the next 2 years and really do what we wanted to do. But it turned out the strategic investors would like to have it all, and it also wouldn't have been to our benefit to have somebody with a strategic interest with a small fraction in the cap table, because the interest to increase the company value is just not there if you have to pay for it in the aftermath. So it was a quick decision to say, well, okay, then the Series A turns into an exit in best case, and now we're talking about that scenario. Yeah, so besides the money, the main argument for us was who of all the interested parties would be the most beneficial to follow our visions, to really bring technologies into a broad sphere of customers. And the turning point has always been the map for us, so say, well, the map is the thing where all the information can be gathered, can be distributed. Every autonomous car can profit from that, and we can help to do that because we know what a car needs. And so TomTom was bringing something to the table that nobody else could offer, to say, well, we have 27 years of map making history. We are the revolutionaries of personal navigation devices. We showed that we can build technology and deliver it to everybody. So this was for us the perfect fit, and we saw that we can bring more value to them than we can bring to Audi or BMW or any of the car manufacturers, because this is a leverage of technology. We can bring the technology to all of them as customers. So what we do today is building the next generation of maps for autonomous driving with TomTom, the HD maps, part of the product unit HD map, and this is a great fit.
Wow. I think it's really unique in that, you wanted to build a startup, but you didn't go the traditional route. You went into deep tech with someone without technical knowledge. You went through a university, which can pose some obstacles. You bootstrapped, which takes time. Instead of getting capital early to do the rocket fuel approach, you did fee for service to keep in operation. And then instead of raising large Series A, you found a strategic acquisition exit as a way to really push the technology forward. If I'm hearing correctly, is that you came from a team that really valued the innovation and the technology over all other things. So many people want to build a startup so they can get rich and make a lot of money. But it sounds to me like your team was just so passionate and driven by the prospect of the future of this technology. Am I understanding that right?
No, 100%, yeah. I think I don't want to make it sound too altruistic. If obviously there's a monetary aspect in everything you do as a profession, So of course we also, if you take great financial risk, you want to gain the reward for it. But you're completely right. When money is your main motivation, or in our case, if it was the main motivation, we would have done it differently. You wouldn't work for an entry-level salary for 8 years. So you would probably not have the grit to go through that, not the... or you're not... Or you were just naive or not smart enough to do it differently, I don't know. But I think we could easily agree that in the team it is about bringing things forward.
So now that you've exited to TomTom and have the means to do almost anything that you want, do you still have that entrepreneurial bug pulling at your sleeve?
I have a very comfortable way of still peeking into those experiences now, since I'm became a business angel myself now. Try to feed back to the ecosystem. I just invested in a few former members of our group, and we're going that stony path again, building substance over appearance. I can have that experience from the backseat now and help them get some funding, I hope. And I think it's a better time for that as well. I think investors are open for deep tech now. Berlin is not only internet business anymore. We are attracting and a lot of people from the automotive sphere. Really, tech companies are coming and are opening up their European headquarters here. So I think the timing is right now, and so that's why what my main outcome is not that we did it right. We did it right for us to that time. So I think you always have to
Put it in
be
context.
aware of that. There is no textbook, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Just because we're pressed for time, I want to ask you just a couple personal questions to know a little bit about Patrick the man, not just Patrick the entrepreneur. First one I want to ask, is there something that you're reading or listening to right now that you would make as a recommendation?
During my 20s and even 30s, I was still into those a bit self-funding literature, when you can Hermann Hesse, all the classics there. Now, it's funny that my little sister, she gave me a book, The Dark Side of the Moon, from Martin Sutter, and it's about a guy. This guy is basically it reveals a lot of the psychology in bureaucracies, and those how it can drive people to a certain point, and the interpersonal aspect of working in a machine like that. If you're just like a part of that machine and you have to function like that. I really liked how he delivered that in this book. That's definitely something I would recommend.
The last question I want to ask, and I kind of already know the answer to this because I've driven around with you in your car. What kind of music, what's cycling on your playlist these days, my friend?
It depends who is sitting with me in the car, I have to admit. So there are a lot of, I try to match it to the audience a bit. If I'm by myself, I listen to a lot of hip-hop that I can play with my son, and my girlfriend is sitting with me. And actually, that's a big factor of living in Berlin. I come to see all those bands that were heroes in my youth. I go to Smashing Pumpkins in June. Nice. Raconteurs are coming, I think, in May. Stuff like that. So the real guitar, honest music, I can enjoy that very much. And also to go to live concert is still something that makes me feel good.
Patrick, my friend, I could have this conversation all day. Maybe we'll get to do it again and dig deeper into some of these many, many other subjects that we didn't get to touch on, but it was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I just want to say, you know, I think back a few times ago that we got together in Berlin. I think I was in the midst of my startup grind, and you were still in the very early stages of being a support on a university team. And how far you've come. I'm proud to call you a friend, and just so impressed by all you've accomplished, man.
Hey, thanks for saying that. I also appreciate our every time we bump into each other. It's great to have these conversations, and I hope it doesn't take another 5 years to do that again.
Well, folks, that was my dear friend Patrick Vogel, former co-founder and CFO of Autonomos GmbH and current site owner of TomTom Berlin. Coming soon in episode 5, we'll speak with Dr. Tim Taba, WHU Kellogg Executive MBA alum and co-founder CEO of Credit Shelf, a recently IPO'd 5-year-old startup that provides a marketplace to connect investors and small business borrowers for alternative financing opportunities. Talk about a meteoric rise. I think you'll enjoy it. Bis nächstes Mal.